Guys, it's happening. Bitwise is making the mega leap right now. 10 or more nations are going to join in this year, and they're getting calls and now getting in direct contact with major countries that want to buy massive amounts of Bitcoin. We're talking about 200,000 Bitcoin or more here.
We've gotten calls from multiple other governments that are investigating Bitcoin. I think you're going to see 10, maybe more governments around the world make their first allocation to Bitcoin this year.
There are also new statements from Kendra Fitzgerald, with Howard Wutnig from the US government involved as well, now saying that even if there were a 50% drop, we wouldn't sell Bitcoin. They are so fundamentally convinced that they compare themselves to Wall Street and say, hey, we're not some weak hands that get shaken out. We're hardcore hodlers. You have to let that sink in. Cantor Fitzgerald now has almost a 50% Bitcoin allocation and is one of the most significant investment firms worldwide. We're also looking at new developments surrounding the US bond issue. But first, smash that like button so Bitcoin can really take off at full speed. If you haven't subscribed yet, take a second and hit the subscribe button. It's really important that everyone understands what's happening here, because the Bitcoin flywheel is about to take off. It would be a shame if not enough people were on board. We can also see in the statistics and so on that recently a lot of Bitcoin has been moving from retail investors, from the small investors to the big players, to the BlackRocks, to the Coinbases, to the Kendra Fitzgeralds, to Michael Saylor's strategy. And now all these new companies are joining in as well. Even more Bitcoin is being redistributed here. And that's why it's so important right now to sound the alarm and to really understand what's going on here. Otherwise, this trend is just going to continue. I already said this a year ago. Hey, don't sell your Bitcoin to the big players. But unfortunately, that's exactly what's happening now, because not enough people have hit like and subscribe here. Of course, there are other reasons too, and I'm exaggerating a bit, but it's just to make it clear to you what's actually happening right now and what people on the sidelines are missing out on. There was a really interesting question here just now. A lot of people responded to it on social media. Here, someone is simply asking, BTC Yeti is asking, will half a Bitcoin be enough right now to retire in 2044? And then someone just posted the power law chart here, and the power law is simply a relatively conservative model that's supposed to describe the price of Bitcoin. There are no massive breakout scenarios to the upside. There are diminishing returns, meaning the returns keep decreasing over time. And here, the answer is, half a Bitcoin by 2044 will be enough for you. 400 million US dollars is enough for you. And that should just show the sheer power of Bitcoin. Of course, over a 1, 2, or 3 year period, it doesn't look that dramatic. Then maybe Bitcoin will go up to 100, 200,000, 300,000, 400,000, something like that, over time with the effect of compound interest and so on. If you don't take the capital out and let it keep working for you, leaving the gains in so they keep compounding, then by 2044 you end up with a staggering sum of 400 million. And that's something you really need to understand. The importance of accumulating as much Bitcoin as possible, as quickly as possible. For example, Warren Buffett said that you need to accumulate 100,000 US dollars as quickly as you can in your life. Then you're the mega kings. Then even with something like a 70-30 portfolio, with an MSCI World or something similar, you can make massive returns over 30 or 40 years. I mean, that doesn't even mean you have 100,000. Right now, that would be an investment of 50,000 US dollars. And with that, we're looking at 400 million. But we also had some news from the White House. Here, Donald Trump says that when Bassett appears on TV, everything goes up. So he's sending another signal here, suggesting that the markets could generally be on the rise now. He's giving more and more signals now that the markets could go up here. I find that really fascinating. He said that in recent weeks, Treasury Secretary Bassett was the most important official in the Trump administration, speaking in the media about tariffs, much more than Lutnick. This explains there was such a sudden change. So, very interesting, and the change was generally more positive here. I think this is meant to be another sign from the Trump administration that they now want to generally pump the markets upward. At the same time, it's very interesting to see that the US government bond problem is still there, the yield problem. We can see here that the last time yields were this high, President Trump suspended the tariffs here for 90 days. Now trade agreements have been made, and the yields still aren't going down, right? So what is Trump going to do now? And if we take a look at this, it really looks pretty bad here. The 10-year US Treasury yield is over 4.5%, and the 30-year Treasury is almost 5%. And that's the problem again with refinancing. The US has to refinance something like 9-point-something trillion. And at the current interest rates, that's absolutely irresponsible. Luke Gromen recently said that if interest rates were to rise to 6%, there would be a government collapse. So we're really not that far off from that. According to Luke Gromen, we're only about 1.5% away from a government collapse. I mean, there are still all those tools in the background, like the Treasury stepping in, the US Central Bank, and so on. I don't think they'll let it come to a government collapse. But no matter what Donald Trump does here, he won't be able to get the bond markets under control. But now let's take a look at what Kenton Fitzgerald has to say first. Howard Lutnick says about himself that he has hundreds of millions in Bitcoin. After this bull run, it'll be billions. They're making a statement here that's so fundamentally crazy. Only some wild Bitcoin maximalist would usually say something like that, but just listen for yourselves.
Tomorrow, I think the beauty of Canner is that when we're committed to something, we're committed to something. I think if, God forbid, Bitcoin tanked tomorrow 50%, a lot of our competitors and a lot of, the classic TradFi Wall Street guys would run away. That's definitely not what we're going to do. We say we're committed, we're committed. In 21, we hired our first crypto bankers. In 22, we hired our first research analysts, and we're the only real Wall Street institution that has pure dedicated research analysts. And we also host conferences every year. Our first conference actually was the week FTX went down. So it was incredibly well timed. But our value prop is that we're really committed to the space. And more than just as a TradFi, Wall Street institution, we're really trying to grow and get smarter. And I think you can really see that with our Bitcoin lending project. So again, trying to bring credibility to the space. We're launching a $2 billion Bitcoin lending product to start with Anchorage and Copper as our custodians. And that project, along with so many other more, we plan to launch like 21 Capital you touched on. Super excited.
And that's just a wild statement coming from one of the most influential investment firms in the world. And that also disproves the theory that so many people have brought up, that these institutional investors jump in quickly. And then if the price drops, they're just as quick to jump back out. They supposedly leave the market just as fast as they came in, and so on. That was, for example, an argument Peter Schiff made quite often. Other people have brought it up too. A lot of gold bugs have made that argument, but what they're actually saying here is exactly the opposite. They're saying that Cantor Fitzgerald isn't comparable to a traditional Wall Street firm that sometimes pulls out of the market. Yes, there are also companies that pull out quickly, but check this out, even with a 50% loss. They wouldn't have a problem here. They held their first Bitcoin conference in the same week that FTX went bankrupt. When FTX collapsed, that was when there was the biggest panic in the entire market. They are fundamentally convinced here, and that's something a lot of people keep forgetting. Bitcoin price increases and parabolic runs are often fundamentally driven by the hodler base. You can think of it like a fire or something similar. On one hand, there's some kind of spark, or something like that, a little spark, that sets everything off, that makes it explode, or boil over. But the foundation, that's like thick wooden logs that just burn, that burn for a long time, that generate really, really good heat, that make for a really solid, long-lasting fire. And those are exactly the longtime hodlers like Cantor Fitzgerald, maybe also 2021 Capital, all these companies that are coming in now, who would take their Bitcoin to the grave if they had to. And then we have the whole group of hodlers, the hodler base, and then a spark can come along. That could be, for example, a major nation that buys Bitcoin. Donald Trump says, okay, we're buying 400,000 Bitcoin now, or some kind of announcement like that. And then we already have the hodler base and underneath the foundation. And that's actually what drives the parabolic bull run upward. And the spark itself is actually irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether it's Trump or later BlackRock or any other trigger, or if the central banks start printing money again. It doesn't matter at all. What matters is that the hodlers are there. And the hodlers we have now are absolutely crazy committed. I mean, we have institutions here that are on the level of Bitcoin maximalists. We didn't have that in previous bull runs or in previous cycles. And that's why I'm so hyper bullish right now. And if we now look at the next statement here from Bitwise, it gets even more bullish. Because here the Bitwise CEO talks about nation-state FOMO and secret Bitcoin purchases of several 100,000 Bitcoin. You really have to check this out.
Yeah, so last year ETFs bought 500,000 Bitcoin. Again, remember, the Bitcoin network only produced 165,000 Bitcoin. So it bought 3 times the total supply. Corporations bought 250,000 Bitcoin. Governments, I think this year could buy a couple 100,000 Bitcoin. So I think if you look at those 3 sources, I think they'll buy more than 1 million Bitcoin this year. And where is it going to come from? The only place it can come from is people who already hold Bitcoin. The only way they will sell is if the price goes up. That's why I'm so bullish on the market.
And that's just wild. He's saying here that he expects governments to buy several 100,000 Bitcoin this year. So several 100,000 Bitcoin will be bought here. That would mean at least 200,000 Bitcoin, but it could also be more. He says, with all the listings, corporations have around 200,000 Bitcoin, ETFs have another 500,000, and so on. Altogether, that adds up to about 1 million Bitcoin, and only about 450 are mined per day. That's just a fraction of it. And that's why the Bitcoin halving really isn't all that relevant anymore, because all the Bitcoin that gets distributed just gets held anyway. They still have a certain relevance. You can't say the Bitcoin halving is irrelevant, but we can clearly see that the distribution rate is much, much lower than what is being taken out of the supply. And now it actually goes even further, and there are even more details. Now it gets interesting again.
The government? Which branch of the government?
Look, the U.S. already established a strategic Bitcoin reserve, right? It already holds $17 billion in Bitcoin. And the executive order from President Trump told the Secretary of Commerce and the Secretary of Treasury to figure out ways to acquire more Bitcoin without impacting tax holder. How could they do that? They could sell some of the gold that the U.S. has. They could sell other crypto assets that the U.S. has and plow that into Bitcoin. I think we're going to see that happen this year. I think the U.S. is going to increase, and not just the U.S. We found out that Abu Dhabi bought $500 million of Bitcoin. We've gotten calls from multiple other governments that are investigating Bitcoin. I think you're going to see 10, maybe more governments around the world make their first allocation to Bitcoin this year. It's happening. People aren't talking about it that much, but it's happening, and it's a very big deal.
It's happening, and it's a really big deal, he says here. They're getting calls from several countries that want to get into Bitcoin, and of course, with Bitcoin ETFs, they'll be buying Bitcoin. He's predicting that at least 10 more countries will join in this year, and that the US will buy Bitcoin. That's just absolutely insane. If that happens, then that's it, game over. So then, things are really going to take off big time. That's always what a lot of people have warned about. When the nation states get involved, we're already seeing what kind of craziness the companies are causing. And if the nation states join in too, I mean, it's already pretty insane. There aren't any direct details about it right now. Probably not even which countries are involved. He talked about Abu Dhabi. I don't know which other countries he meant, but Larry Fink has already said that they're in contact with sovereign wealth funds, not just pension funds, but actual funds. And yeah, I definitely think it's absolutely crazy what's happening right now. Feel free to let me know in the comments below what you think about all this. If you still want to buy Bitcoin, I'll put a link to 21 Bitcoin down below. Here you can still front run a few nations days. Not all of them anymore, but it's really about time. At this point, the entry moment is basically shifting, so you might end up getting in after the nations instead of before them. Go ahead and check out the 21 Bitcoin link. With the code BitcoinHotel, you can still get up to 20% off fees when buying Bitcoin. You'll find the link below. See you then.